Hello, and welcome to our Reversing Insulin Resistance webinar. My name is Denise, and I am the founder of Essential Wellness. This webinar is part of our How Not to Die Plant Strong program. Today, we have 4 plant-based medical professionals who will speak on how to manage insulin resistance using a plant-based way of eating. And I think that is our segue for Jenny to talk to us about how we can achieve all of this. So I think you have still got the spotlight, so I'm just going to mute and stop my video and hand over to you.
Great, thank you, Denise. Let me just get my slides up. And so I'm going to talk about what to eat for reversing diabetes and more specifically reversing insulin resistance. So eating to reverse diabetes, we recommend a whole food plant-based diet, and I'll go through that in a little more detail. You know, it's a diet high in carbohydrates and low in fat. And most people, when you tell them this, they say, you know, but I've been told to do a low carb diet. You know, my doctors told me, or my, health diabetes educators told me. I think Malcolm's well explained, you know, a low carb diet will bring down blood sugar and make it appear the diabetes is reversed, but you are still insulin resistant. So if you eat carbohydrates, your blood sugar can skyrocket up. So to reverse insulin resistance, you need to get the fat down really low. Then when you eat whole plant foods, you have better carbohydrate tolerance. So what is this whole foods plant-based diet? It's a diet based on whole grains, legumes, vegetables and fruit with some nuts and seeds. Animal products are excluded. Food processing is minimal. In particular, avoid vegetable oils and minimize sugar and salt. And picking up on what Malcolm said, the emphasis is on eating whole plant foods, and I'll try and demonstrate why that's so important. So, you know, no meat, no chicken, no fish, no eggs, no dairy. And, you know, many people think, but we need them because we need, you know, protein, we need calcium. Well, there's no nutrients in these foods that we can't get from plants. And there are many components that are deleterious to our health. And I've just given a few examples. You know, animal foods contain cholesterol, saturated fat, AGEs, microbes, pollutants, estrogens, particularly, you know, when you have another animal's milk, and lactose. And many people in parts of the world are lactose intolerant. I put this little picture here when we were in Ningbo, China last year. Denise showed us the cabinet that said Western style food, and it was presented as though this was, you know, the great section of the supermarket, and we just looked at it and thought, oh gosh, you know, more diabetes, more heart disease with eating these foods. So is whole food plant-based diet a vegan diet? Well, yes, but a vegan diet describes what you don't eat. So you don't eat animal foods, primarily for ethical reasons, but it can often include highly processed foods containing oils, sugar, salt, and very low in fiber. And so, you know, there are plenty of products that are vegan, like French fries, biscuits. I don't know if you get Oreos in China, but they're not healthy. So we call it a whole food plant-based diet to distinguish it from just a vegan diet, because the whole food plant-based diet describes what you do eat, which is a diet based around whole plant foods from the 4 main food groups. And I'll go through these 4 main food groups. So the first one is whole grains. Whole grains have more fiber, more vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients than refined grains. And this can make a big difference to your nutrient intake. You know, if you're worried about getting enough iron or calcium or any of the vitamins and minerals, when you refine a grain, you lose a lot of that. And, you know, a typical grain has the bran around the outside and the germ in the middle. And when you refine a grain, you take away the bran and the germ, and you're left with the calories, but with far fewer nutrients. And, it's the whole grain consumption is consistent in reducing risk of obesity, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and even all-cause mortality. So if you've heard people talk about grains as being not so good and avoiding grains, whole grains are healthy. What sort of grains are we talking about? Well, rice. Brown rice is the whole grain. It has more fiber, vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients than the white rice. Now, I know in China that most people eat white rice. So we sort of give it a bit of a red light, yellow light. We don't and acknowledge that many people are eating it, but know that you're getting the same number of calories and far fewer nutrients. So those nutrients I'm talking about, like iron and zinc. So we recommend that you try and switch to brown rice and use white rice sparingly. But there's plenty of other whole grains that you can eat. Let's say you think, I don't like brown rice. Well, or in your breakfast, you could try oats, millet. This is freekeh, which is cracked wheat, buckwheat. So all of these are intact whole grains. And we recommend these, particularly for insulin resistance and diabetes, that you aim for eating intact whole grains, so where the grain is just cooked up in water, rather than a grain that's been milled into flour and then put into some other product like bread or something. So these are the things that should be daily on your plate, whether it's the brown rice or these other grains. So if you are going to eat bread, choose a bread made with wholemeal flour. So if you're very healthy, we give a green light to a bread made with wholemeal flour, but we do say it's a yellow light food if you have chronic disease. And maybe in the short term, if you're trying to reverse insulin resistance, you should actually avoid bread, because even if it's wholemeal, it's the whole grain milled into flour, and that can make a difference. But definitely avoid white bread and avoid foods made with refined flours. So the second main food group is legumes, beans, lentils, tofu. And again, these are healthy, the world's longest lived populations. Several places around the world that were coined the blue zones, where a large number of people lived to beyond 100. And what they had in common was they had a plant-based diet, but in particular, they ate legumes. So don't let anyone tell you to stay away from scary legumes. They're, very healthy. We're talking about, there's, lentils and all sorts of beans, chickpeas, and so on. Legume consumption reduces risk of chronic disease and also improves the health of those with chronic disease. And so there is research that shows that, your diabetes will improve eating legumes. And what sort of legumes? We've just got a few images here. This is a vegetable dish with black beans in it. With lentils. In fact, I've got a pot on the stove today that looks very much like that one, I think. Cooking up a big pot of lentils with vegetables. So, each of beans with whole grains or potatoes along with lots of vegetables. Now you'll see over here, I've got tofu listed as a yellow light food, particularly if you have insulin resistance and you're trying to reverse it, because it's got a much higher fat content than the other beans and lentils. So it's possibly something, it might be a food that you eat a lot of. If you're trying to reverse insulin resistance, I'd back right off on the tofu, the edamame, tempeh, and any other products made from the soybean. So our third and fourth food group, vegetables and fruit. And there's really just absolutely no doubt that the more fruit and vegetables you consume, the better your health. And there's plenty of science to back it up. And in most countries of the world, people know that eating fruit and vegetables are healthy, although, those with diabetes might be told to be careful of the fruit. So We recommend that you have vegetables and fruit with every meal or even in between meals. So especially the leafy greens and cruciferous vegetables. So cruciferous are things like your broccoli. And so there's just some images of the kinds of meals that we have. This is a brown rice noodle stir fry with loads of vegetables and probably some legume in there. I can't actually see which one. Maybe there's some edamame or tofu, but I can't actually see it. Eat lots of salads, throw leafy greens into your into your food. Whatever you're cooking, we always throw lots of leafy greens into it, and we always steam lots of vegetables, including leafy greens, along with having, say, rice, potato, and a dish with legumes in it. There's just some examples of the kind of way we recommend people eat. Also have vegetables or fruit for snacks. This is some air fried potatoes. We love having potatoes as a snack, or if we're traveling, we always bake some potatoes and have them to eat. You can even have, salad as snacks, lightly steamed broccoli and some raw carrot along with some fruit. So lots of ideas to include them in your day. So how much vegetable and fruit should you be eating? So the Australian Dietary Guidelines recommend at least 5 serves of vegetables and 2 serves of fruit every day. We actually average about double that, about 10 or more serves of vegetables and at least 4 serves of fruit. I looked up the Chinese dietary guidelines and it gave it in terms of a number of grams. So between 300 and 500 grams of vegetables and between 200 and 350 grams of fruit. I think you worked out how many
similar number of serves.
Similar number of serves. So what does a serve look like? Well, if it's cooked vegetables, half a cup. If it's something like a potato, one, medium one, or if it's salad, which is not so packed down, then 1 cup of salad is considered 1 serve. Same with fruit. If it's a nice medium-sized apple, that's 1 serve. If it's a smaller fruit, it'll be a few pieces. And if it's a chopped or canned fruit or berries, it'll be a cup. Although I have seen some recommendations that say a half a cup of berries is considered a serve. So somewhere between that half cup and a cup. Okay, so I've talked about whole grains, legumes, vegetables and fruits. And I said at the start that it includes some nuts and seeds. So what about nuts and seeds? We recommend you consume nuts and seeds and avocado in very small amounts. They are energy dense, and I'll come back to that. And many nuts contain a significant amount of saturated fat and very little omega-3, which is the main essential fat that you want to be making sure you're getting in your food. Yes, there's research that shows benefits of nuts and seeds for various chronic disease, such as heart disease, diabetes. There's even research that shows nuts are good for weight loss. But this is when nuts replace highly refined foods. It is actually little advantage in adding nuts to a whole food plant-based diet, apart from just a little bit as a taste or as a garnish, because the evidence for better health outcomes, including disease reversal, is with the lower fat plant-based diet. And our website, which Malcolm mentioned, and I've got the address at the end of my slides, advocate a low-fat plant-based diet. And we've got an FAQ on this. So if you want to, look at some more information on why we recommend this and follow some links to some of the other plant-based doctors and what they say on this, we've got that on our webpage. Okay, so minimally processed foods. We do include some minimally processed foods in our diet, such as a plant milk, soy milk. Just note though, we don't drink them by the glassful. You don't need to drink plant milk, soy milk for your calcium. You get calcium from, your fruit, your vegetables, it's in all your whole plant foods. And if you're buying a soy milk or a plant milk, you must watch out for if they put added sugar or added oil in there. You know, ideally you want a milk that's just based on, you know, soybeans, or if it's an almond milk, that it's just based on almonds. I know in China, I've been in Denise's kitchen and she makes soy milk at home with, you know, just using whole soy. Again, go overboard. We consider this a condiment. You use a little bit to flavour your morning breakfast, or, you know, have it in a cup of tea. Add a little bit to a, you know, some curry that you're making, but, you know, don't go overboard. And of course, do avoid cow's milk. We give a red light, recommend you stay away from processed vegan foods. Now, these are images for items that are found in Australia, and probably, you know, I'm sure there are plenty of vegan sort of fake meat type things that you can get in China, but they probably won't look like this. The main message with a lot of these is that they're often high in fat, high in using processed foods rather than whole foods. So, you know, if you want to make some burgers, you know, mash up some chickpeas and kidney beans and add some sweet potato and a bit of leftover rice and, you know, some spices, and cook those up. Much better for you than trying to use a fake meat. And avoid highly processed foods. So sugar, including sugar syrups, things like maple syrup and rice, you know, rice malt syrup. At best to be, you know, either stay away from, particularly if you're trying to reverse disease, or absolutely minimize, so that in your whole day, there's nothing more than maybe a couple of teaspoons of these. Also stay away from refined grains like white flour that's used to make cakes, pastries, and also pasta that's made from refined flours. I'll make a special mention for, if you're gluten-free, sometimes gluten-free pasta is actually even more highly refined than just a normal white wheat pasta. So be very careful with those, or stay away from them altogether. We also don't recommend protein powders or sort of protein isolates that are found in some packaged foods. So stay away from those. They're not going to improve your health. You get protein from your beans and your grains, and, you know, the tiny little bit of nuts and seeds that you might add to your into your day. We also recommend you stay away from vegetable oils. People think, what, even olive oil? Isn't olive oil healthy? Well, all vegetable oils, even olive oil. Avoid margarine and products that have added oil in it. If you go to the supermarket and have a look at the ingredient list of biscuits or all sorts of things that you might be familiar with buying, check if there's added oil. Most of them have it. Why do we say stay away from oil? It's highly processed. All vegetable oils are energy dense and nutrient poor. Now, in Australia, the tablespoon is 20 ml and has just probably slightly under 20 grams of fat, which is 160 calories, same amount of calories in a can of Coke. Now, I don't know whether the tablespoon in China might be smaller. The American tablespoon is just under 15 ml. So it'll be, a little bit smaller than that. It's about 120 calories. Now, if you add oil to your food, let's say you tip that tablespoon into your, into your rice and bean dish, it's either going to displace more nutrient-dense foods, because for the 160 calories that you could have had of, rice and beans, you've replaced it with oil, which has almost no nutrients, or this is what happens with most people, it doesn't displace any foods on your plate, it just adds calories and causes weight gain. Oops, I've left a T off weight gain. Oils have no fiber and almost no nutrients, and they're not healthy to your blood vessels, to the lining of your arteries, the endothelium. And you don't need to add oils there's no nutrients you need to get from them. Whole plant foods provide all the essential fats you need, and you don't need to add oil to absorb nutrients. We've also got a no oil webpage, so you can have a look at that on our website as well. So this sort of sums it up. I haven't finished yet, but I'm just showing you this slide sort of part way through of our traffic light system. So we give a green light to all your whole grains that are just cooked up in water, your brown rice, your oats, your freekeh, millet, quinoa, all of those grains, your legumes, your starchy vegetables. They're things like potatoes, sweet potato, non-starchy vegetables, so all the others, greens and, yellows and oranges and all that, so orange carrots and things. Green leafies get a special mention because they're so healthy. Fruit, mushrooms, and herbs and spices. So we say eat these foods with abundance. And you almost, we don't say eat until you're totally stuffed, but it's hard to overeat if you're eating the foods from this column. We put a special mention whole grain flour products such as pasta and bread. If you're healthy, not trying to reverse disease and not trying to lose weight, when we give it a green light, because so we eat some whole grain pasta and eat some wholemeal bread. But otherwise, it's definitely a yellow light food to use more sparingly. If you're trying to reverse disease. We also put tofu. So all the other legumes are in the green light column. We put tofu in a yellow light because it's quite high in fat and won't help you if you're trying to reverse particularly insulin resistance. Nuts and seeds. If you're going to add any seeds, we recommend something like flaxseed meal because it's particularly high in omega-3. But you don't need to go overboard. No more than a tablespoon is needed in a day. Avocado, used sparingly. So I won't go through them all, but you get the idea. This is sort of our summary. So to eat to reverse insulin resistance, I've been giving you the overview of a whole food plant-based diet, but there's some further modifications you need to think about. It needs to be low in total fat and particularly low in saturated fat, which means no animal products, no coconut milk. Coconut products are very high in saturated fat, so you don't want to be adding coconut milk to your vegetable curry. A good rule of thumb if you're trying to reverse insulin resistance is to have a maximum in a day of 30 grams of fat. How do you know what's in food? Well, if you're interested, you can try one of those food apps, those trackers such as Chronometer and or MyFitnessPal, and track a day's eating and see where it comes out. It will probably give you a % calories of fat. And so it's 30 grams of fat per day for someone eating about 2,000 calories is within this range of 10 to 15% of calories. The reason why I highlight this figure, 30 grams, is that when you actually look at food you're eating, and if it's got a label, you can see what's the serving size, how much am I getting? If I eat this little piece of chocolate, gee, one mouthful, I'm going to get 8. So it gives you an idea to how low it's got to be. Chocolate just doesn't feature if you're trying to reverse insulin resistance, or maybe on your birthday. You'll have reversed it by your birthday, so that'll be okay. You also need to aim for low glycemic index foods, at least until insulin sensitivity is restored. And so that's why we say to avoid the flour products and choose intact grains. Also useful to limit dried fruits and to eat foods low in calorie density because they'll help you lose weight. And Malcolm explained why it's so important that if you're carrying excess weight, it's important to try and turn that around. So I've got a few slides to explain energy density or calorie density, because I just said, eat foods low in calorie density. Energy density is the key to weight management and thriving on a whole food plant-based diet. It's the number of calories or kilojoules, where you could use either unit of measurement, in a given weight of food. We've got a chart that we use calories per 100 grams, and I'll show you that in a moment. It's a constant value for any food, regardless of the portion size. So these plates of carrots, I've got one plate with far fewer carrots than the other. So there's more calories on this plate on the right, but the energy density of carrots is 41 calories per 100 grams. So that doesn't change. So as I say, less calories here, more here, but it has an energy density or calorie density of 41. per 100 grams. If you've watched any of the material in the US, you might have seen the people talk about calories per pound. So it's quite, that's the unit of measurement they're using. We use 100 per 100 grams. To understand why calorie density is important in eating whole food plant-based, you need to understand a little bit about satiety. Now, animals in their natural environment, eating their natural food in its original form, however they're meant to get it, like the kangaroo eating grass, the parrots eating, fruit in the trees, they'll maintain their weight in a narrow range, even when food is plentiful. Have you ever seen an obese kangaroo? Now, I know some of you have probably never seen a kangaroo, but when we drive through country Victoria, we do see kangaroos sometimes just standing up there in the paddock, in a nice green paddock. There might be a few of them at dusk, but you never see a kangaroo looking like this one. You never see that. I've just stretched the photo for effect. And so, but I tell you, if you put kangaroos into a paddock where you gave them artificial food, food that was processed and high calorie density and not their natural food, they would gain weight. And when we feed pets in our houses, they tend to be the ones that gain weight because we feed them food that's too calorie dense for them. And all animals are attracted to foods that are more calorie dense. It's the survival mechanism. So humans are no different. In ancient times, if food was scarce, if there was something that was richer, around, it's those who would have done well are those that, ate the rich food. But of course, I'm talking about an era until the last few hundred years when the richest food you would have got your hands on might have been, the leg of that kangaroo or beef or whatever. Meat's actually, a little higher calorie density than most plant foods, but it's nothing compared to the highly processed foods that you can get in your supermarket. So, we're designed from an environment where food is scarce, and in the past, getting enough to eat was our problem. So this is our energy density chart, and it shows you that just basic categories. I've talked about, the main food groups. So things like vegetables, very low in calorie density, fruits, a little bit higher, but still very low, potatoes, legumes, so all of those, lentils, legumes, even tofu is not that much higher than 100. Intact, brown rice, pasta, and so on, and other intact grains are around the 125 calories per 100 grams. And then you suddenly jump up. So your meat is around 200 per 100 grams. So what does that mean? If legumes are 100 and meat's 200, if I'm used to eating like a piece of steak or a piece of salmon, and it might be in fact 200 grams, that's 400 calories. I have to put, twice the amount of legumes on my plate to get the same amount of calories. So you can eat a much larger volume of plant foods than you can even with meat. But you can see how quickly we go up the chart. We start eating like bread, even if it's whole grain, it's still quite calorie dense. Cheese and sugar up there around 400. Nuts and seeds, so you can see why we're cautious about eating nuts and seeds. You could eat 6 times the volume of legumes for the same, the same number of calories as nuts and seeds. And of course, vegetable oils hit the jackpot of the highest energy density or calorie density food you can get your hands on. And remember, we're hardwired to seek the energy dense foods. So if there are foods around, if you're at a party and there's a table of food, which ones do you reach for? You tend not to reach for the ones that are really low in calorie density. If there's little cheese balls or, packets of or chips or those sorts of things, they're the ones that people tend to reach for. And just to get an idea about calorie density in terms of the way it fits in your stomach, and coming back to that concept of satiety, we tend to eat about, now I know, it varies depending on whether you're really active and male versus female, but let's say we eat about a meal of about 500 calories. And what does 500 calories look like in our stomach? 500 calories of oil doesn't fill your stomach at all. 500 calories of cheese, not much more in there. 500 calories of meat and your stomach's not even half full. Can you imagine? You could put all three together and not have filled your stomach, and you've just eaten 1,500 calories. And this is what is happening when people eat fast food. They're eating, burgers that are just got so many calories in them, and along with, the cheese and the oil. If you eat 500 calories of potatoes, rice, and beans, you've almost filled your stomach. It's actually hard to eat 500 calories worth of fruit and veggies, particularly if you don't include potatoes. So you can really fill your stomach by eating that combination of potatoes, rice, beans, fruits, veggies, and you can eat to satiety, and you haven't overeaten in terms of calories. And just remember, people usually eat the same volume of food regardless of calories. So, you could be eating at home, mostly eating these foods. And if you go out, you might be eating something that's, a lot smaller, and you could actually eat a lot more calories. So it's like the volume is what you're used to eating. We eat a large volume of food. We've taught ourselves, well, Malcolm's been doing it most of his adult life, but I've taught myself to eat a lot. When you first go to whole food, plant-based eating, sometimes it's hard to actually, you're not accustomed to eating such the volume of food. So that can be something you need to think about, to make sure you eat enough. And when you're eating food that's highly concentrated, it's easy to eat too many calories. And this really is, provides a really good solution to obesity if you just follow a calorie density approach and eat mostly foods from these categories. I've just got a couple of examples to show you. 2 plates of food, same number of calories on each plate. Handful of cashews comes to 34 grams. I've calculated that to be 200 calories. 4 medium-sized baked potatoes, 200 calories. Now, people sometimes think of potatoes as being fattening, but it would take you a while to eat those 4 potatoes, whereas you could, how many mouthfuls would it take you to eat that handful of cashews? And let's just come back to that number I gave you for reversing insulin resistance. You want to eat no more than 30 grams of fat a day. If you ate that handful of cashews, that is 17 grams of fat, just gone like that. So your fat budget for the day is blown by eating that. Now, you might not be eating 34 grams of cashews like that, but how many, I so often see people making cashew cream sauces to put on pasta and things. So, be careful that in any context, those nuts and seeds add a lot of calories and a lot of fat. And, it's obviously easy to overeat the one that's more calorie dense. Here's another example comparing, and this is actually a fairly large dinner plate. So this is a serve of brown rice. I mean, I would eat more than this, but, for many people, they'd be quite happy with that serve of brown rice, 160 calories. And that's how many calories are in 1 tablespoon of the Aussie olive oil. That's less if it was a US tablespoon. And the problem is, of course, that people are eating food where they've tipped the oil in the rice or in whatever dish they're eating, and they don't even notice it. And I'm just comparing it also to a slice of a fairly, dense sort of wholemeal bread. So you can see you can eat, a lot more volume for the same number of calories than if you ate bread or the oil. So I think this is my last image on calorie density. What I've done here is I'm just showing you, I've done a real approximation. I haven't, weighed and measured this plate, but based on the foods that are there, there's some rice underneath, so a lentil stew, there's some mashed potato, pumpkin, and then some steamed greens and yellow vegetables. There's approximately 400 to 500 calories on that plate. So that's a huge dinner plate, piled high of food. And it's about 400 or 500 calories. 1 salmon steak, they're normally cut to 200 gram size, is 400 calories. but people don't eat a salmon steak on their own. They might have a few leaves of a salad, and they might eat some fries with it. And, you know, I've just looked up the table for McDonald's medium fries, 330 calories in there. And so how easy it is for people to eat both, that's 730 calories, and they still probably haven't filled their stomach compared to the low calorie density food that's on this plate. So we're wanting people to eat more of this food and to stay away from this food. So taking a calorie density approach is the way to eat an optimal diet. You're eating foods that are unrefined, low in calorie density. They're all high in fiber. So all those foods on that plate on the left on the previous slide, they're all high in fiber, which is so important for health. So you just need to eat a variety from the 4 main food groups. Now, sometimes people say, oh yes, but am I going to get enough? Am I going to get my protein? Am I going to get my calcium? Well, we talk about a food-based eating plan, not nutrient-based. If you eat the unprocessed, minimally processed plant foods from those 4 main food groups, your nutrient needs are easily met. So long as you're eating enough calories for your energy needs. One little problem is that sometimes, if you think of that plate I showed you, sometimes some of you might find eating just half that plate, you're feeling full. You might have then only had, 200, 250 calories, which isn't enough if that meal is representing, say, a third, a quarter to a third of your whole day's calorie intake. Nowhere near enough. So you will get enough fiber and protein and calcium and iron and zinc and all those things, so long as you're eating enough for your energy needs. The one exception is vitamin B12, and we recommend you take a supplement. If you're eating a totally plant-based diet, no animal foods, you do need to supplement with B12. I'm not going to go into that one. We can, if anyone's interested, we can answer a question on that. So here's just a reminder of our traffic light system and our website. So we have lots of information. Malcolm had showed you the tab that showed medical conditions, where information on diabetes. We've got information on recipes, meal plans, but here's where, so you'll find under the Going Plant Strong tab, the no oil page. I think that's the main thing I wanted to draw your attention to. So, okay.
So thank you very much, Jenny. We hope that you have enjoyed this video. If you would like to know more about reversing disease through using a plant-based way of eating, please either scan the QR code or send us an email. We love to help others eat healthy through eating plant-based. Ciao.